What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1, and we are continuing our 2025 predictions. The South Carolina Gamecocks up next, a team that had a surprise season last year. Honestly, the over/under on this team, I believe, was 5.5. They were able to get to 9-3. Had a great season. Now, I didn't see that coming. I was not high on this team. In fact, I was way off on South Carolina. Looking back at my predictions from the last 3 years. If you go back to 2022, Adam at 7-5, they went 8-4. Adam at 7-5 and 23 as well. They were a bit disappointing at 5-7. I had this team at 4-8 last year. I thought they were going to be terrible. They went 9-3. Lenora Sellers, I just did not see him being as good as he was. I didn't see the defense taking that jump that they made. This team was actually really good last year, and they were in that playoff conversation even at the end of the season. So a South Carolina team that comes into this year with Sellers back and maybe a little bit of hype. We look at the schedule. Here it is. Before we go game by game, I'll just give you my thoughts on this team. So I do think they're kind of similar to Ole Miss. I think people are overrating them just a little bit. This is going to be a good team. I think people, if you watch my Ole Miss video when I talked about Ole Miss having a drop, I still think Ole Miss is going to be a solid team. I don't think Ole Miss is going to be bad. And I'm kind of in the same boat with South Carolina. I just don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. You've got Sellers back at quarterback. He is getting a lot of hype. I believe he was first team All SEC. So from SEC Media Day. So high expectations for him. My question is, who's going to step up around him? The running back position is a question mark. Still waiting on some eligibility issues there, and that's going to make a difference with this team potentially. Wide receivers, you've got some guys there, but not a lot of depth. The offensive line, I don't think is going to be great. So the offense is really going to be about Lenora Sellers. He's going to have to carry this offense, and at times, I would say he carried them last year. They did have Rocket Sanders, but there were some games I think where he was a little bit banged up. So it was, Sellers did do a lot, and he's going to have to do that again this year. He's going to have to have a Heisman type season, in my opinion, if South Carolina is going to be a playoff team this year. I don't know that he's going to be able to do that. Again, I just don't know if there's enough around him. And then you look at the defense. I think they'll be pretty good, but I don't think they'll be as good as last year. I think there's going to be a pretty good drop off there. Linebackers maybe not all that strong. So, I think this team will be pretty good, but just not as good as last year. That's kind of where I'm at with South Carolina. And so let's get into the predictions. Virginia Tech's up first. That game's in Atlanta. Virginia Tech team that's kind of, I wouldn't say starting over, but they did lose a lot of veterans last year. They've got several new coaches on the staff this year. So I'm really not expecting a ton. They do have Kyron Drones back at quarterback. But I think South Carolina just the better team here. A somewhat competitive game, but I could see Carolina winning it by a couple touchdowns, something like that. I do like South Carolina here in this one, and of course I think they beat South Carolina State as well. So a 2-0 start for the Gamecocks before opening up SEC play against Vanderbilt. Vandy, of course, surprised some people last year as well. I think they'll be decent again this year, but I think South Carolina is the better team. Plus, they're playing at home. I think this is one that South Carolina should be able to get. Not a guaranteed win. If some of those question marks that they do have, if they don't come through, this is a game they could lose, and even this next game against Missouri as well. This one's going to be a tough one, September 20th. I think Missouri is going to be a pretty good team this year. It's almost a toss-up, though, when I look at these two rosters. I think they're pretty even. In a game like this, maybe you do look at that one player that's a difference maker, and that's going to be Lenora Sellers. So I think South Carolina is able to go on the road and win a close one, but could very easily see this one going the other way. This is definitely a game I could see Missouri getting, but I'm going South Carolina. I think, again, Sellers makes the difference. They get the win here and continue a great start with Kentucky next on September 27th. I'm not high on Kentucky. They're not going to be terrible. I don't think any team in the SEC is going to be terrible, but I think they might be the worst team in the conference. I think South Carolina's defense will be good enough in this one. I don't think Kentucky is going to do a whole lot offensively. Sellers will make some plays. I think South Carolina's going to be able to run the football a little bit. I think South Carolina wins this game, similar to the Virginia Tech game, maybe by a couple of touchdowns, and that gets them off to a 5-0 start before their first bye week. Then they've got a road game at LSU, obviously going to be a tough game. You look back at last year and how close South Carolina was. Remember, they really should have won that game against LSU. There was a bad call that really changed that game. You look at the Alabama game, they had a really great opportunity to win that game. They were driving, I believe, with the lead when they fumbled there, and then they got the onside kick and had a chance. So it was almost a really special season for South Carolina last year, but I think this is not going to be as even of a matchup this year. I think LSU got a little bit better. I think South Carolina got a little bit worse. The game is also on the road. It's hard for me to find a way for South Carolina to win this game. I think LSU does win this one. A competitive game, but I think LSU probably by a couple of touchdowns, and that's going to get South Carolina to 5-1 before playing Oklahoma at home. I think Oklahoma is actually a better team this year than South Carolina, but the game's at home for Carolina, and I've got Oklahoma coming off of a big win over Texas, and so maybe a letdown game for them a little bit. South Carolina looking to bounce back after a tough loss, so this one's really kind of about where it's at on the schedule, where the home field advantage is, more so than the X's and O's, because I do think Oklahoma is the better team, but I think South Carolina is able to get a big win here at home. They bounce back, they get to 6-1, but the last half of the schedule here, the last 7 games, it's a tough schedule. You've got Alabama next on the 25th. This is, I think, a game a lot of people are going to pick as an upset for South Carolina to upset Alabama, especially after the game last year. I just think, just like with LSU, though, Alabama got better, potentially a lot better. South Carolina, maybe a little bit worse. It's at home. I think South Carolina has a chance, but I'm going to go Bama here. Really, though, I'm looking at Missouri and Alabama, and as I was doing this, so I have to make all my predictions. I have to go through all the teams. I have a spreadsheet, if I picked the wins and losses. And so once my predictions are done, they're done. But just as I was making this video, I was thinking, I could see them possibly upsetting Alabama, but then losing to Missouri. So that's why we say at the end of the day, it's really just about the record prediction. It's fun to go through game by game for a YouTube video, but in terms of like just trying to be accurate, you really just want to get that overall record right or as close as possible. So I could maybe flip those around, but for, again, the way that I decided to go with this, I'm going to say Alabama wins that game. Then you got Ole Miss. This is a toss-up. I think these teams are very, very even. I mentioned that earlier. I think very, very similar teams. Teams that are both being overrated a little bit, but still teams that'll be good. So I was back and forth here. I do think Ole Miss is going to be a team that gets better as the season goes along. With a lot of new pieces there, which you could say the same thing about South Carolina, but it's almost like a coin flip type game. Home field advantage, I think, could be the difference here. I'm going Ole Miss, and that drops Carolina down to 6-3. Then a bye week before playing on the road at Texas A&M. Very high on the Aggies. I think this team is potentially a playoff team this year. That's a very tough place to play. I do not see South Carolina going in there and winning that one, so I think that's a loss. I do think they beat Coastal Carolina. Maybe a somewhat competitive game. Just, it's right after a big game against Texas A&M. You got Clemson the next week. I could see them starting slow, but I think they'll come through and beat Coastal Carolina. So 7-4 record going into that Clemson game. And again, when I look at this schedule, LSU and Texas A&M, I think those are losses. Between Alabama and Missouri, I think that they're going to win one, they're going to lose one. Ole Miss, I could see that being a win. So still, I think this team at least has 3 losses going into this game. Probably not in playoff contention, but this is going to be a big one. I think Clemson is loaded this year. I think that they'll learn their lesson from last year. Just some terrible coaching, especially on the defensive side with the way they went about that game last year. I think they'll be locked in on Sellers. I think their defense will play well. I think Clemson's offense is ready to really explode under Garrett Riley. We saw that as the season, kind of went along last year, and I don't think South Carolina's defense is going to be as good as it was last year. So even though this game is in Columbia, I still think Clemson is good enough to go in there and win. I think they get some revenge, and I'm going to go Clemson over South Carolina. The Gamecocks finish 7-5. I think that's a pretty fair, prediction. I could see them getting 8-4. Again, maybe they beat Ole Miss. That could be a game they win, or maybe even Clemson. It's a rivalry game. You never know. But yeah, 8-4 is probably about the best case scenario in my opinion, unless, and we'll circle back here, unless Lenore Sellers has a Heisman type season, and he can carry this offense. Like I said earlier, if he can do that, this could be a playoff team. Maybe they only lose to LSU and A&M. They get to 10-2, but it's going to take, a special season from him, in my opinion, for them to get there. I think 7-5 is more accurate. Could even see 6-6 or 8-4, but I'm going to go right there in the middle at 7-5. That's my prediction for South Carolina. Give me your prediction for the Gamecocks down in the comments below.